Hello, I'm your host, Brian Callanan. It's an unsettled time for Seattle politics after a fatal shooting at Seattle Center and a serious breakdown in emergency communication. Mayor Katie Wilson requested and received the resignation of Police Chief Shon Barnes. City Council members and many others have been critical of the mayor's decision. So what sort of confidence does the council have in her leadership going forward? I'm with City Council President Joy Hollingsworth and Councilmember Maritza Rivera to discuss this issue and the questions you're sending in too. Next on City Inside Out, Council Edition.
And I think every single gun violence issue in our city deserves this type of response, this type of energy, these type of resources.
We're not big fans of surveillance. I wish we didn't need it. But the fact is, when crime happens, they do help solve crime.
All that and more coming up next on City Inside Out, Council Edition. Thanks again for joining us on City Inside Out, Council Edition, here on the Seattle Channel. Brian Callanan here with you, and here with me, I'm very glad to have Councilmember Maritza Rivera, who represents District 4 in Northeast Seattle, from Ravenna through to the U District up to Windermere. Very much appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Brian, for having me here.
Also with us is Council President Joy Hollingsworth, who also represents District 3 from East Lake down to the Central District. Thank you for being here, too.
Thank you for having me.
Let's jump into it. And Council President Hollingsworth, I want to talk to you first about the council's relationship with the mayor right now, following her decision to ask Seattle Police Chief Shon Barnes to resign after the shooting at Bite of Seattle last month. As the news about the resignation was announced a few weeks ago, you told Como News, "I believe this decision to ask a police chief to resign or to let him go is irresponsible, and it's a tad bit reckless, and it puts us in a very difficult position as a city." We are recording this program soon after the news came out that 2 Seattle residents have actually filed a recall position against the mayor. I just want to put this in perspective here. A judge is reviewing that to see if it'll go forward. I feel like I need to ask you directly. Do you think the mayor should step down? Is that where we are right now?
No, the recall, that's none of my business. That will be handled in the courts.
Yeah.
I'm focused, and I know my colleagues are focused on the continuing improvement of the relationship with the council and the mayor's office to make sure that we can run the city well. People want to know that their government is working for them, from the executive branch to the legislative branch. And so that's what we're committed to, making sure that that communication is tight, that we're working together on issues to solve for the community.
Got it. Councilmember Rivera, you're a member of the Public Safety Committee, and I know you take that role very seriously. I know that you and many other council members were very supportive of now former Chief Barnes. You put out a press release as the reports were starting to come in about the resignation. Mayor Wilson's lack of experience and her incompetence have led to poor decision-making and put the safety of our communities at risk. I wanted to talk about this. Is the mayor's decision-making enough of a safety risk in your mind that she needs to step down? I just want to make sure I asked you the same question, too.
Yeah, no, I agree with Council President. That is not, for me to say. And I'm focused on making sure that we're building relationship with the mayor's office in the same way I've been doing all along, actually, since she got started. Her success is our collective success as a city, and so I'm going to continue to do my part. That's what my constituents want me to do, is to stay focused on the issues and to build that relationship with the mayor's office, because we all succeed if we work together.
Has something changed in between? It feels like a long time ago now, but just a few weeks ago when the shooting happened to now, to restore some of your confidence in working with the mayor? Can you talk to me about that?
Well, nothing has changed for me, and as far as since this new administration came on board, the job is to work together, and I take that really seriously. So for me, I'm going to continue, like I said earlier, to work with her. I have seen her since, and we've chatted, and I've chatted with some members of her staff, including her deputy mayor and the director of public safety, and I'm going to continue to do so. That's the job. Like I said, I take it seriously, and we need to address the issues of our mutual constituents.
Thank you. Council President, some thoughts about what was happening then and what you were thinking then and where we are now in terms of that relationship. Is it changing? Is it growing? What's going on?
Yeah, I think the comments that people made last week were about actions that were made at that point in time. I don't want to conflate that with, like, what does the relationship look like? I still stand behind my comments regarding those actions, but we also know that we have a new interim police chief with Police Chief Sales.
Yes.
And we're going to support his success, because his success is the community's success, it's Seattle's success, and that's what we're focused on. All the other noise that is happening, I think, really has taken away from the shooters that are still out there. And then also, too, not only that, are the shooters that the unsolved mysteries, Connor Dasa Holland, Amar Murphy Payne, the other shooters that are out there that we don't know, that we still want the police chief and the police department to solve as well.
I got a question about that coming up in a little bit, but I do want to shift to this police response, if I could, following the shooting on July 26th. I want to begin with this active investigation that's going on right now. So the council had a briefing about this here in mid-August, just a couple days before we recorded this show, and heard about the many officers who ran towards the gunfire. They assessed the scene there. They provided medical aid on the scene to the shooting victims there, too. Three people were killed, 4 were injured, including a 2-year-old. There are still apparently a suspect or suspects that the SPD is trying to track down, but there are a lot of challenges involved with that. Here's how Interim Chief Andre Sales responded to a question from Councilmember Saka about the need for transparency from Seattle Police when it comes to finding one or more suspects.
I'm trying to be as transparent as possible without losing the integrity of the investigation. As much as I want to give all the information that we have, at the same time, though, we have to understand that when the information is put out there and it either going to help us, that suspect, person of interest, may get that information, because let's face it, they do watch the news because they have to be ahead of what we're doing. It gives them an opportunity to leave this area.
Councilmember Rivera, you were at that meeting. Were you satisfied with the chief's answer there, for one? And is there any information you have on potential suspects in this case? Where are we here?
I don't have information about potential suspects. I actually missed that particular meeting, but I did watch it. Some of the heroic efforts of both SPD and our fire department were missed as part of the post-incident lack of communication between, that was coming out of the mayor's office, the lack of information and the lack of timely information.
Yeah.
But I want to uplift the fact that SPD and fire did a great job responding, and we've heard that from many of our constituents, and I don't want that to get lost in this particular case. And as far as I don't have more information. I don't have more information than anyone else about suspects.
Yeah.
But I trust that SPD is doing the investigations. I do think that we should be looking, and I'm going to bring up the opportunity to talk about cameras, because I think those would be very helpful as you're investigating crime. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't help deter crime, but it does help investigate crime in my mind.
Do you have concerns about that transparency part, though? I know Councilmember Saka was trying to get at that. I know a lot of people are frustrated. Wait, is there one suspect? Is there 2? And that kind of a thing. Some thoughts about that?
Yeah, we should have as much information as we can get. I am not a police officer or investigator, so I don't know, exactly how these investigations go. But I think, Brian, overall, the issue was that an incident happened and the public had to wait many hours before any information was shared. So I do support transparency. I wish we had more timely information, even if it was just to say right away, we don't have a lot of information, but this is what we do have. And that did not happen.
And I'm going to dive a little more into information and how it was released or not released in just a little bit. But Council President Hollingsworth, I want to talk about the response to this shooting, because you touched on something that we actually got a message about. Omari Salisbury of Converge Media brought this up on social media recently. The City Council wants to know if there is a killer on the loose from the Seattle Center shooting. That is a good question. However, we know there is a killer on the loose from the murder of Amar Murphy Payne, Connor Dasa Holland, Tyrone Love, and so many more, hoping that the city government keeps the same energy to bring justice to so many families who lost loved ones in the Emerald City. How do you respond to that? You were touching on this earlier.
Absolutely. We've heard that before when we had a press conference about Aurora girls, and people said, hey, this is great that we're paying attention to Aurora and the gunfire, but what about Southeast Seattle? And we talked about how Southeast Seattle, these stats that I'm always talking about, 13% of the population, but 30% of the gun violence that is in our city, and putting extra attention there. And these are things that come up when people see the city react like this, and understanding and wanting to know, well, how come we didn't react to this with a murder in South Seattle, or the 2 young kids that were killed in Rainier Beach? These are things that people are always asking about. And I think every single gun violence issue in our city deserves this type of response, this type of energy, these type of resources, and this type of concern and sense of urgency. It's unacceptable anytime that happens in our city.
It feels like a good time maybe to start talking about the work the council wants to do to prevent gun violence. And Council President, let me start with you here. You recently sponsored an amendment to the city's mid-year supplemental budget to reallocate $250,000 in unused funding from the SPD's Real-Time Crime Center to go towards violence interruption ambassadors. This funding is unused because the mayor's put this pause on deploying closed-circuit TV cameras on Capitol Hill. This was a contentious decision, I know, for the council, going back and forth and talking about this. Can you tell us why you made this move and what impact you think these violence interrupters will have?
Yeah, so it's been known I've supported cameras in our city throughout different areas. We have them in 3 big hotspots downtown. We have them in CID, and then up north in Aurora. We wanted to expand them. They went in Soto. The program was paused for Capitol Hill and Central District, where we heard from residents and people on both sides. Okay, so this is very contentious. Fast forward, those were not installed. And so now we're getting towards the end of the year and made a decision after 2 major gun violence pieces that have happened in Capitol Hill to say, you know what, we need eyes on the ground right now. And so made the decision to take money, because I don't know if we're going to turn them on, turn them off. We've seen that happen with Soto. We turned them on for guests. We turned them off for residents. Now we're at a point where people are wanting folks on the ground. I thank Councilmember Rivera and my other colleagues who voted in support of this, because they know how important this is. And I have to deal with this every day. I have to deal with the gun violence victims, the folks that are losing folks, the businesses that are getting bullet holes shot through them, the folks that are terrorized, you know, that are experiencing this all the time. And also, too, Brian, the fallout with, you know, some people can go home and go to sleep, but there are some folks like us that are so connected to the community that have to deal with the mom that lost her husband and now she's about to lose her home and she needs help, so she's asking for resources. The friend that's jumping on sofa to sofa because she lost her partner, right, from gun violence. This is the impact that it's having. This is beyond policy. This is real life every single day. And if I know I can do one thing with that vote to put people on the ground, I would do that vote over and over again.
Yeah, and can you tell me what violence interrupters are and what they're going to actually be doing?
Yeah, there are people on the ground that de-escalate situations before they arise. So
not police. These are different.
No, these are folks that are going to be out at night. So what I've heard from community on Capitol Hill and Central District, they want people at night. They want folks engaging with people before stuff happens. They want to make sure that things are safe around in the community. We had the Torchlight Parade last year. We had gun violence prevention folks on the ground preventing fights before they happened. Okay, we had them at Emoja Fest. People were there preventing stuff. We also had SPD there. You know, people were getting in fights. There were no guns, but it was like, you know, we're creating a sense of calmness and safety for people, and that's what we want on Capitol Hill. We want proactiveness.
Got it. And Councilmember Rivera, I wanted to talk about this when it comes to these closed-circuit TV cameras. You've just talked about it. You're a big fan, and I know that the council president is too. With this vote,
That's a nice word.
Well, you support it. You support it. Maybe that's a better way to put it. I guess, though, when people were looking at this vote, they're like, wait, you're taking money away from closed-circuit TV cameras. And I want you to help try to parse this out, because this was a difficult thing for some people to understand.
Yeah, so the mid-year supplemental is supposed to be where we look at for the budget for that year and any adjustments that we need to make. It's not really meant to take up whole new bodies of work. I supported Council President's ad because I know, and I have prior experience at the City of Seattle, including in the budget space, that at this time of the year, between now and the end of the year, to be able to utilize all that funding for the cameras, given what Council President said earlier, the fact that they're not being installed or turned on, it's unlikely we're going to spend that money through the end of the year. And because I know that residents on Capitol Hill, because I know folks on Capitol Hill too, our friends on Capitol Hill, need response with safety issues, then to me it was prudent to use a small amount of the CCTV money that I know we don't have the ability to use by the end of the year for this purpose. It was still to help in crime prevention. We all support, we're not big fans of surveillance. I wish we didn't need it. But the fact is, when crime happens, they do help solve crime. So I am in support of it, and I do want to continue that. I want those cameras in Soto turned on. I want the cameras on Capitol Hill installed and being utilized. Yeah. It does help. Even Seattle Center, I don't know how many cameras are at the Seattle Center. No one has answered that question. And, you know, in terms of doing investigations, do we have, you know, is there footage of what happened that will help us solve that crime? They do serve a purpose, and we need to be honest about that. No one would want to use them, but here we are, and they do help in crime investigations.
Thank you. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I did want to talk about a proposal that you've been really working on when it comes to preventing gun violence, this national network of safe communities. You hosted a symposium about NNSC, as it's called here, a few months ago. What is this program? What could it do for Seattle?
I am hoping it will do what it's done for other cities around the country, including Boston, Baltimore, Philadelphia, South Bend, Indiana. It is an approach out of John Jay College in New York City, evidence-based approach that's had 40 to 60% gun violence reduction in those cities that I mentioned. And we did have folks from Baltimore and Philadelphia here, as well as South Bend, to talk to us about how they implemented that effort here. That effort is a carrot and a stick approach, if you will. It is a focused deterrence approach. That's what it is. It's something that they created, and so they go and they work with cities on the ground. They don't bring people to Seattle to help to do the work. We have to do the work. It is a concept where there's a three-legged stool. It's law enforcement working with community and working with moral voices, what they call moral voices, to identify those folks in every city, whether it's here or anyone else, any other city, excuse me. There's a small, very small percentage of the population engaged with gun violence. So it's identifying those folks and focusing our efforts on getting those folks to stop engaging in gun violence. If they need services, then we provide those services for them. But if they don't accept services and continue to engage in behavior, then there's going to be a consequence. The accountability piece is what is part of this approach as well, and it's not something that we're honestly doing here in Seattle. So my effort is to, the symposium was to intro what it would be like to work with the National Network for Safe Communities. Everyone was at the table there, from my council president was there. Not all the colleagues could be there because of OPMA issues, but the mayor's office was there, the city attorney, the prosecuting attorney, public health, the community-based organizations. Everyone was there at the table, and it will take all of us who were at the table, and even the folks that weren't yet there, to work together to institute this effort here in Seattle, and I hope we will do it. And it is my intent to bring a resolution saying that we are going to partner with NNSC to bring that effort here. I too want to see the 40 and 60 to 60% gun violence reduction here in the city that they're seeing in our city, that they're seeing in other cities. It's worth us looking at. We have all the tools in the toolbox. That we need all the tools. It is all important. The violence interrupters are important, SPD is important, and all the partners that we talked about are important. You can't just do one approach.
Got it.
So, and this approach is worth looking at, and not just looking at implementing here, because it's had such success.
Thank you. Looking forward to hearing more about that. I do want to head back to the aftermath of the Bite of Seattle shooting and talk about this communication breakdown that happened in the hours following it. There was this delay of nearly 5 hours before police released any update on the shooting, even with an apparent shooter or maybe shooters still at large. The mayor made one announcement about 2.5 hours after the shooting with some erroneous information about who was in custody here. The Seattle Times actually reported that the mayor was in touch with former Chief Gil Kurlikowski to investigate what happened, but he apparently backed out. Council President Hollingsworth, I'm trying to figure out who's in charge of investigating this. What's going on?
So I know that there's been an investigation with our OIG office.
Office of the Inspector General.
Thank you. I know I speak in government terms.
Happens all the time.
Doing all these OIG,
you got it,
DEA,
CP.
FBI. Okay. So that is happening. And here's the thing, Brian, that I think is important. So there was just a shooting where an officer was shot at in South Seattle. There were 3 people involved, and other folks got injured. And there was communication from our police department shortly thereafter put out so people could understand what's going on. So I know that there are systems in place to be able to get information out. I can't tell you why there was a delay. That is not for me to answer. I know that the people will do their investigation piece, and we'll get those reports and we'll get that information. I know the media will do their thing with investigating, getting emails and text messages. That's there. But I want to bring it back to we still want to have safe communities. And there are still people that shot people and killed folks within our community that I want to focus on, and then also supporting our new chief. So while that is going to take care of itself, finding out the 5-hour delay while people were hunkering down in place, they were in the armory, they were hiding, people were terrified. Those answers will happen when they do, and we can focus as council members on the safety of our community moving forward.
Got it. Councilmember Rivera, some thoughts about this, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, at the end of the day, the buck stops with the mayor. So I will say the mayor is the boss of all the city departments, including SPD. The mayor is the operations chief of the city. And so the buck does stop with the mayor, and it was my expectation that during such an incident, we would have heard from the mayor sooner rather than later. Even if just to say, this is what we know so far, and we don't have a lot of details, but more to come. And you can do multiple press conferences as the situation unfolds. I also wanted to hear, I worked in a prior mayoral administration, so did the Emergency Operations Center get called?
Operationalized, yeah.
Operationalized, thank you, Brian, because that is critical in this type of an incident where you have multiple folks that were shot. This was a mass shooting, so to me that seems like the EOC should have been activated, because that also keeps all the city departments on the same page with the information and with having an action too. If you have to do something,
got it,
that will get disclosed as part of that activation.
I hear what you're saying with regard to the buck stops with the mayor, but in terms of the Seattle Police Department, what sort of accountability do you lay with the SPD? Because they were in charge of that investigation, and they did not put out information, as they sometimes do in these different events. What are your thoughts about that? What role did the SPD play in this communication breakdown?
And that remains to be seen,
Okay.
and that's part of the investigation for OIG. It seems we, at the public safety meeting yesterday, there weren't answers about, who was on deck first, who had the information first, who shared the information first, who shared what, and then subsequently we also saw in the news that the public information officer for SPD said that they had, wanted to do something sooner, and then it wasn't done sooner. So there's a lot of missing information here. It was a little disappointing not to see the mayor's office at that public safety meeting not give more information, preliminary information before the OIG information on what happened.
Okay.
I mean, I remember post the riots, the Durkin administration appearing before council and having to do the same thing. So, anyway, but as Council President said, with the OIG investigation, it should disclose a lot of the information, lack of information that day and what went wrong, so we don't repeat it in the future. Because we're here today and we also have to work together to make sure things are different for the future, things are done better.
Brian, we just want transparency,
That's right.
honesty,
Are you
political, just transparency and honesty and straightforwardness. That's it.
Are you confident you can get an
Period.
I hear what you're saying. Are you confident can you get an independent review from the OIG, which is a part of a city department? Does it need to be somebody external? I know that's part of the consideration here too.
Those are discussions going on right now.
Yeah.
Is it the OIG? That implies that there was a problem with SPD. You do it independently, then it's like, hey, we're looking at it as a whole with the city, right? From city council, mayor's office, SPD, city departments, Seattle Center. That's up for discussion right now. But I think what's important, people just want the facts. They want the information. They want the people arrested that did this at the Seattle Center, so they want to hold people accountable. And people want to make sure that if this happens again, and this is the most important piece, if this happens again, that we as a city can respond effectively and they can trust us. Trust is a big thing in this. And they want to know that we can react quickly, just like those officers did when they rescued the 2-year-old who got shot, right? The 2-year-old's laying up in the hospital, and the people that died, they know that the fire department's going to run towards whatever they need to make sure that people are on the EMT onto the hospital. They know that they'll have timely information, so if they're hiding in the armory, they can say, hey, the scene has been secured. We can be able to exit safely and not wonder what's going on. They need to know the city knows how to respond to these things. That's the most important piece.
And that's why I said earlier, Brian, that it was really important not to lose in terms of the lack of transparency and communication and how best we could do it in the future, not to lose sight of the fact that the first responders were right on the scene and they did all the right things. And maybe we would have had even more casualties had they not responded so quickly. And so folks should feel confident about the actual response and that there's work to be done on the communication side. But they should feel confident about the response. That was very well handled by both SPD and fire on the scene on site.
Thank you for that. Council President Hollingsworth, I want to make sure I get this in here. I've heard you say publicly you want the council to be a little more involved in the search for a new chief here. I'd like to know what kind of candidate you're looking for, because the mayor's raised concerns about the amount of time former Chief Barnes was out of town. His family was living in Chicago since he started here last year. We received a few messages on this, including one that said this: Publicola published verifiable reporting that shows Shon Barnes was out 40% of the time. Is that something council members think is normal for a police chief? If so, why? I just want some thoughts about the time Chief Barnes spent out of town, what you want in terms of presence, being in Seattle for a new chief.
Yeah, I wasn't his supervisor approving travel or not. I don't know what that looks like, so I can't comment regarding that. Every time I had asked the chief to be here or have a meeting, he was accessible, he was transparent, he was honest, he was very professional. So don't have a problem with that piece. I think that's really important to talk about. The second thing is the mayor, and I know myself and some council members as well, I don't want to speak for them, do align on what we want for. The mayor talked about some of the things that they're looking for in a police chief, and also ensuring too that we have the community involvement as well. That's important. You want to have the community involvement. This is their chief. This is the city's chief. This is not the council's chief. This is not the mayor's chief. This is the city's chief, the police department. And so that's going to be important. When I say involvement, usually someone sits on a search committee, the council's involved, we're engaged in that process, because at the end of the day, we also have to confirm that person. And we have to vote on them and meet with them and make sure that they're the right person for the job. And we did that with former Chief, Dr. Shon Barnes. And so looking forward to engaging that process for the new chief.
Got it. I've got about a minute left. I would like your thoughts, Councilmember Rivera, on what you're looking for in a new chief, and any other comments about what's ahead here in terms of this very important search. Does it need to be someone from inside the department, outside the department? I know that's always a big consideration.
That is always a big consideration, Brian, and I've been here for many chiefs at this point. I concur with my colleague, Council President Hollingsworth. I mean, I also want to say that my personal experience with Chief Barnes, he was very professional, he was responsive, he was a great partner, and he was very focused on community policing. And I met with Interim Chief Sales this morning, who I know is also focused on community policing. I think he calls it relational policing, which is another form of all to say that it's important for police to be working with community members, getting back to community members knowing their chief by name and knowing that he cares about community is really important. So making sure that council, community, and the mayor are partnering and part of that process together is really important. And it instills confidence in the process as well. It shows our constituents that we're working together. And I just want to say, Brian, also in terms of the communications piece, you know, constituents want to see us all working together. So you will see that that's why I'm saying I'm continuing to commit to partner with the mayor, to seeing how we can improve things, and because that's what the role is, and that's what constituents want, all of us working together, and I'm committed to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for your time. We will be back next time on Council Edition. That's all the time we have for now. See you next time.